Evening, everybody. We've really got a short input here, but are we on the screen there? If I see this, is it showing there? That's the same. Thank you. Okay, so created a little bit of a short insert here where I've summarized some of the research that we have today worldwide that looks at happiness post-retirement and what are the real factors for happiness after retirement, and titled the talk Pathways to Happiness in the Afternoon of Life. And I steal that term, the afternoon of life, from Carl Jung, who some of you may or may not know is the esteemed psychiatrist, because he always thought of life as a sort of day, and that retirement, post-retirement, was the afternoon before the sunset. And I thought there was something quite poetic in that. I've always enjoyed that. So let's really begin by looking at what I call the biological level post-retirement, which would be the brain. What does research say about what happens to the brain in people after they retire? And this is a critical consideration for those people who leave work and now look forward to a more restful experience after work. Many have suffered from a deteriorating brain state as a result of lack of stimulation. And I'm sure that you're familiar with people who've passed on, grandparents and so forth who've had that. Is there a way to retain brain health after you retire? And what would that way be? Do you have to do a lot of crossword puzzles and work out a bit of algebra sums? And if you keep doing that, you keep your brain alive. Okay? Turns out that you can do as many crossword puzzles as you like. You can do mathematics problems. You can try and stimulate yourself by reading. And all these activities will have a very minor effect on retaining your brain capability. However, one factor in repeated study comes back again and again that shows that people who have large-scale social interaction in the afternoon of their life retain their brain capability. And it's a very, very important point. Most people don't realize it. The act of social interaction is a very complex act and activates many areas of the brain, because we are social beings, we are social animals. And one of the worst things that you can do after retirement is become isolated in some way or form. And think about how many people, as they get older, become increasingly isolated from other people. This will result in a deterioration of the brain. So the very first point I want to make tonight is that the degree to which you are involved in social relations, right from the day you leave the working world to the day you depart the planet, will be directly correlated to the health of your brain. Okay? And I've put on the screen there for you some of the research that's just come out. You'll see that's about 2011. People with regular social ties demonstrate significantly less cognitive decline when compared to those who are lonely or isolated. Some researchers believe that socialization boosts brain reserve and is an essential component of a brain healthy lifestyle. Okay, so that's point one, and you'll see each of these points are going to build. So the takeaway here is social interaction is the most important thing to have when you retire. It's not about cognitive stimulation in the typical sense that we think about it, which is exercising your mind. It was Confucius that said, the used doorstop never rots. You ever heard that before? The used doorstop never rots. But the nature of that use has got to be social. And that's the key point. First point. Okay. So this I pulled out of the New York Times from February of this year. And then on the bottom left, I pulled that out of it's a study on aging from 2011. And on the right, you've got the National Institute on Aging from the US. And as the title says of this New York Times article, it says retirees find meaning serving the needs of their communities. Engaging in social and productive activities you enjoy, like taking an art class or becoming a volunteer in your community or at your place of worship, may help to maintain your well-being. And then it goes on to explain how these people are less depressed. And on the other research, it shows that volunteering increases psychological well-being. So if we take the first point about brain health and the importance of social interaction, and we add it to this piece of research, and there's several of these forms of research, we find that people post-retirement who are involved in acts of service to their community, let me say that again, who are involved in acts of service to their community, experience a meaning loop that comes back into their psychological well-being, which gives them a sense of fulfillment and happiness. Consider how those two work together. The one level, the brain is staying more and more healthy by virtue of social interaction, and at another level, a sense of fulfillment and meaning is occurring through acts of social engagement in which the person feels they are serving a community or volunteering or being involved in some kind of interaction which is creative and meaningful to other people. And the two start to work together. Is that making sense? Think again about individuals who become isolated, who retire to a very quiet and faraway place, who retreat in any way from the social world. Number one, their brain state, the use doorstop is no longer used and therefore starts to rot. And number two, there's no more meaning loop in terms of their sense of being important in the world to a community of people. Now, if you think about your careers, wherever you are in your life cycle, think about how meaningful your career was to you. The act of work is a meaningful act because it is an act of value creation, either in the creation of a service of some kind for which there is reward, or a product creation of some kind for which there is reward. And that reward is money, yes, but it is not only about the money. Why do people work? For the money, yes, but not only for the money. Why else? Sense of recognition, a sense of satisfaction, a feeling of making a difference, a sense that you are important in some way to other people, that you are somebody in the world, that you have done something worth speaking about, that you yourself have value because you have created value. And if you think about that psychological recipe, work enables that recipe for us through our adult life. If you take that away, what happens to that meaning cycle? What replaces it? Sadly, what often replaces it is a narrative of, I'm waiting to die. That's the dark, we would call the low road. You don't ever want to wait to die. You want dying to happen to you when you weren't ready because you were still busy. Isn't that how we want to go? And that still busyness is a form of creating value in the world. So business and work enabled that for most of your life. And then after retirement, you need to replace that meaning narrative with acts of service of another kind, such as volunteering. Or in the article over here, you have there Peter Roston, who was the founder of MAPS, which is a media institute. What he does is he goes back into communities, and he's retired, but he's offering music advice to aspiring musicians for free. And he goes, regularly, and they come to him for that kind of guidance and mentorship. And people that are involved in that meaning loop, they don't have to earn money from that, although if they do, that's even better. But what they get is the meaning cycle, which gives them the sense that they are valuable because they create value in the world for other people. Got that? And then you get all the plus because the brain is being stimulated through the social interaction and the brain stays healthier for longer as well. So those are the two. But there is a third and final point. And this is it. This is straight from Nelson Mandela. What counts in life is not the mere fact that we have lived. It is what difference we have made to the lives of others that will determine the significance of the life we lead. And so this is the concept of legacy. This is the idea that it is not only meaningful to create acts of service for others in the community, which come back as a sense of being valuable yourself, but it is even more powerful to have a feeling that you will leave something behind, some kind of legacy behind, that others will find to be of value. Now, many people think of this in terms of inheritance. I've worked my whole life very hard, I've created wealth, and now when I go, I will leave behind that wealth for my descendants to enjoy, and they will enjoy the fruits of my labor, and when I die, that will be a meaningful legacy to have left behind. I will be remembered, and I will have been significant. Ironically, the nature of that significance and memory is meaningful to the person when they're alive. It's a curious irony, is it not? Because probably when you pass on, you won't notice that you've left something behind. That was a joke. It's a tough audience here. Okay, so you can't be sure. Well, you could be wrong. There could be all our ancestors looking down and saying, I should have invested in that one asset class. And maybe that's true. But it's when we're alive and in the afternoon of our life that it becomes important for us to feel that when we die, we will be remembered and be remembered as a person of value. And I've used this word value very consciously, because note how the notion of value, of course, it's a financial term, but it's also a psychological term. It's an emotional term. It's a term about I was worth something. I am worth something as a person. It was valuable that I lived this life. And what they find is that that's the third point. Those individuals that in the afternoon of their life have the feeling that they are able to leave something behind that will be meaningful to others, which doesn't have to be their children and doesn't necessarily have to be a financial legacy, by the way. It could be a legacy of any kind. It could be a business legacy, it could be an artistic legacy, it could be a legacy of thought, it could be a sense of being important in the community, or have being remembered as someone who was loving and kind and helped people, whatever it might be. If you have that sense that when you go you will be missed, even to your last day, that creates an even deeper sense of fulfillment and happiness right up until your last day. And you put all three together. So you're interacting socially as much as possible, which is keeping your brain healthy. You are active in meaning loops, in acts of service that are live, where people are getting something from you in one form of community or another, whether that's business mentorship to young entrepreneurs, whether you're volunteering at a community organization, whether you're part of Rotary or some kind of place of worship of one kind or another, that there is that loop and cycle, and that you have a sense that you're leaving something behind that you will be remembered by, just like Madiba says over there, that you were significant. Those are the three factors which research repeatedly and consistently show that those in the afternoon of life that have those three experience a deep happiness as they come closer and closer to their last days. And it's as simple as that. It's kind of an uncommon common sense when you hear it. You know, it's not so far from what you probably already thought. So here's the last point, which is very apropos this evening. Look what that all sits on. Sadly, and it's a sad truth in the world we live in today, if you are not financially able after you retire, the very first thing that happens is that you have to constrain your living expenses in a very, very particular way or be supported financially. Does that make sense? And that often results in a constraining of what is possible for you to do in terms of interacting with other people. The most common example is that you're retired to an old age home of some kind. And if you've ever been to visit old age homes, you'll see that this notion of old age home, which people don't like the term, is a place in many respects of isolation. People are not socially interacting very much with each other. And many refer to these institutions with the great kindness that they give, but at the same time, they are places where people have ended their contribution to society and then waiting for the ending of their life. And it's a very sad consideration, and I'm making it plain and simple. If you are financially able, you don't need to constrain yourself at the end of your life to a room in an institution of some kind, because financially that's all you can manage. You can actually have the money to participate in an active community, have your own place that you live in, etc., etc. That's the first part. Secondly, think about contributing back into the community. To the extent that you're financially able, you also have the best healthcare, the best enablers to move you around, transport, assistance. You can go and visit, you can travel, you can be part of things, you can be a benefactor of one kind or another. Philanthropy, it allows for a lot of community engagement and community service. It's not required. I mean, you could still volunteer in a place for the homeless, but it becomes increasingly difficult when finances are constrained. And the more financially able you are, the more you can contribute, the more things you can do. Okay? And then when it comes to leaving a legacy, having the finances to continue to build something or to leave something behind makes it a lot easier to do that. And those things all come together only if you plan for your retirement in an effective way, and when you retire, also manage your finances in a sensible way that considers the length of time with which you'll still require them. And of course, you may or may not be familiar with this, but life expectancy is increasing all the time. Every year, life expectancy averages increase. So, you know, if you're retired at a certain age, you can have 3-4 decades sometimes before you check out. So, from that point of view, there's a lot of this kind of consideration that needs to go into what will happen after retirement, but there's also a lot of consideration that needs to go into managing your finances to support these three things to ensure that the afternoon of your life is a deeply fulfilling and happy one. Okay, so very brief, very short. What we thought is any questions or comments we could take on this particular topic, which I'll take now, and then we'll move to the next one.